Everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, and today I'm going to be going over the 5 rarest comic books that I have in my collection. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most. Now, I was nominated for this challenge by another YouTuber, Simply Good Comics. If you don't already subscribe to him, go check his channel out. He is having a 400 subscriber giveaway with some pretty fire books in there. So I would go give him a look and subscribe. He had nominated me for the 5 most valuable / rare books in your collection. I had done another video a while back of some of the biggest keys that I had in my collection, which I'll link up here. If you want to go check that video out, I try to get books that were not on that list. So I went and selected kind of the 5 rarest books that I have in my collection to kind of highlight those. Not necessarily the most valuable ones, not that there aren't some valuable ones in this pile, but these are the books that are going to be the ones that you see the least often out of the books that are in my personal collection. Now we're actually going to be starting out with 2 runner-ups. Mostly left them out of my top 5 just because I didn't want my entire top 5 to be Invincible books. I could have made an entire top 5 out of Invincible books. It is an independent company with a very low print run. I really didn't get hot until the TV series came to Amazon, which bumped up a lot of those. Most people didn't keep them in great condition, so higher grade ones are pretty rare. All right, first runner up is Marvel Team Up number 14. This is the team up between Invincible and Spider-Man in the Marvel universe. There's a crossover story in the Invincible comic books where he's traveling in between dimensions. This kind of focuses on one of those dimensions that he stops in. Now, as total rarity goes, this book is not super rare. There are 311 copies on the census. Not a super high number, but not a super low one either. But there are only 57 copies of this in a 9.8, almost twice as many copies in a 9.6. So having this book in a 9.8 is very difficult to do. It's just not a book that had a tremendously high print run. And for those who did pick it up, most of them weren't kept in super high condition. Big piece of my personal collection, finding one of these in a 9.8. So happy to have this one. And it's the first runner-up that I have. And the second runner-up that I have, another Invincible Key here. This is Noble Causes, Family Secrets, a very, very low print run story. Nobody really bought this story at all. This is actually the cover B, but is Invincible's first cover appearance. It's him right down there on the wanted poster, and his first cameo appearance in there. He's in here for a split second, shows his face. He's being interviewed by one of the other character's fathers to see if he knows where his daughter is at. Just the very definition of a cameo, but technically his first appearance in continuity in a comic book and his first cover appearance on the front. This one, obviously, costume changed a bit from this original design. Again, total copies, 173 on the census, so not very high for this book, but they were kept in better conditions, probably because nobody actually read them, with 68 of these being in a 9.8. All right, that's it for my runners-up. Now we get into my top 5 rarest books in my collection. First one of those is going to be Uncanny XMen number 268. I know what you're saying. I've seen this book all over the place, Charles. What do you mean this is one of the rarest books in your collection? This is actually a second printing, and you can tell that by the difference in the emblem down here. You could only get this book from ordering a collection of books through a JCPenney catalog way back in the 90s. So this book actually comes in at 68 total copies on the census compared to the regular first print that you've probably seen, which has about 3,200 total copies on the census. In a 9.6, is a very nice 9.6. There's a very slight color break up the top. There are only 34 copies in a 9.6 or better on the census. Classic Jim Lee cover. With a crossover between the Black Widow, Captain America, and Wolverine. All right, number 4 on the list is Contest of Champions number 1. This is the 1 in 25, I believe, ratio variant. This has the first appearance and first cover appearance of the White Fox here. There's another 125 variant as well, but she is not on the cover, which makes this one kind of the go-to key for that character. Her popularity is kind of ebbed and flowed. She's a character that generated from that Contest of Champions video game and has now been brought into fruition into the actual MCU. Big fan of the character. Hard book to find in a 9.8. 51 total 9.8 copies in existence. 115 total copies of this book on the census. It's a character I think has a big future, very Black Cat-esque, which obviously makes her a personal favorite of mine as well. And I just like the cover on this particular book for my 4th addition to the list. All right, number 3 on my list is Invincible Returns, number 1. This is a one-shot from Invincible that actually happens in the continuity of the regular story and actually has the first appearance of the biggest bad from Invincible, the Grand Regent Thrag. Now, this is the second print. You can tell from all the blue lettering versus the yellow lettering that was on the first print. First print's a pretty rare book as well, but with only 18 total copies on the census, 10 of which being a 9.8, 3 of which of those I own. This is the rarest print of this book, even with the higher end ratios for this book. The second print comes in. It is a book a lot of people missed in their runs, but again, a very big key nonetheless, and one that I think will go up even higher than it already is once Grand Regent Thrag is revealed in the Amazon series, which again, of course, he will be, as he is the main villain and antagonist for the overall story. So glad to have these. Still looking to find other ones that are out there. I don't usually find a ton of these at all, and the raw ones generally are pretty beat up. Again, nobody really cared about the Invincible stuff until the Amazon stuff came in, so I try to snag them up when I can find those. All right, it would not be a complete hobby hero list without some amazing Spider-Man on the list. And for our 4th addition to the list, we have Amazing Spider-Man 194, the German edition of this book. This one was printed in 1981, which is 2 years after the original printing. So foreign reprint, if you're not into the foreign market at all, some of these foreign reprints are very, very hard to find. In high grade, they are exceptionally rare to find, as the collectible craze really didn't hit foreign comic markets as early on as it did in the United States markets. To put it in perspective, there are only 19 total copies of this book on the census. There's one 9.8, one 9.6, and one 9.4. I do think this is probably a 9.6 candidate. If I ever wanted to sell this book, I would probably crack it, repress it, and resubmit, because I do think it has a good chance of coming back at a higher than a 9.4 grade. But for my personal collection, it is fine as the way it is. Great addition to my Black Cat collection. And again, my number 2 rarest book in my collection. All right, now it's time for the rarest book that I own in my collection, and that is Spawn number 1 in a 9.8. I'm just kidding. This book right now is one of the most prevalent books in existence. I think 9.8s come in at just shy of 15,000 total copies in a 9.8, with a little over 30,000 graded copies of this book. This is a book that I find in almost every collection I go through. If somebody tells me that they collected comics in the 90s and they don't have this book, I do not believe that they collected comics in the 90s. It is a great Todd McFarlane cover. It is a very iconic cover that almost everybody owns, or at least knows of if they know anything about comics. I'm glad to have this in my collection. I'm glad I have a 9.8 for my personal collection, but it is probably the most common 9.8 book that I have in my personal collection. So with that, we'll bring us to the actual number 1 rarest book that I own. If you were a fan of the channel, I have shown this book before. It's been a while since I've had it on here. I keep this book put up, so it doesn't come out for air too often, but this was a perfect opportunity to bring this one out. And that is Invincible number 1, and a 9.4. And you might be asking yourself, what is up with this comic? That doesn't look right. And you are correct. It does not look right. It should look like this comic right up here with all those nice bright colors. This one has a manufacturing error that was present on the book. The reason why it isn't a CBCS label and not a CGC label is because CGC does not recognize it as a universal error, so they will give it that awful green label. I don't know why. I can't get a good answer for why they will do it. They do recognize the manufacturer error on that green label. This particular book is already a very low print run, even in its normal print run. This is the only error edition of the book that CBCS has ever graded. There are also only a handful of CGC copies in existence as well. There's only one recorded sale of a CGC copy with this manufacturing error, and that was all the way back in 2009. It was also a 9.4 copy. To my knowledge, there isn't a copy higher than a 9.4 grade, and there are only a handful of green label copies of this book from CGC, and again, you can't see what those are other than looking at sales history. Most of them are signatures that were not verified. So to my knowledge, this is the highest graded copy of this book, not single highest, but the highest graded copy of this particular error for a low print run book. Estimated probably less than 10 or 12 with this manufacturing error in existence. If you guys know about one higher grade, I would love to hear about it. But this is the rarest comic book that I own. Obviously a big Invincible fan, so it is a huge piece of my personal collection. I'm very happy with this particular book in my PC. And excited to see what the Amazon series holds for Invincible. So let me know down below in the comment section what your rarest books that you own in your collection are. But until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.